So, one of the things that I put down as a September incentive was a 10 to 15 minute presentation of some sort. Initially, I wasn't entirely sure what I was going to do, but then I had a thought, and I got there. And I think that everybody is going to like the topic that I have chosen. So join me as I say, but hello you! I'm CPC Gamer, and you're welcome to Fact Hunt. 15 times I made a Peter Molyneux joke. I'm kidding, Larry. You know I love you, right? You know he watches this? He's probably going to watch this one as well. Hi! No, our actual presentation is 7 baffling tie-in video games. Also, I forgot that I used my penguin pointing for this, and yeah, that was a really good choice. Well done, me. So, let's begin. Tie-in video games have existed for about as long as video games themselves have existed. So here are some early examples. You've got Superman and E.T. on the Atari 2600, and Batman and Star Wars for the Amstrad CPC. Typically, tie-in games would be based on a recently released movie or a popular TV show. And in theory, it's a good idea for several reasons. It will help to speed up the development process, because you don't need to do much in the way of character or level design, because it's basically already done for you. And you're guaranteeing sales, because people like to support that thing they like, and will generally go for branded stuff over generic. So, you know, Toy Story the movie was great, surely Toy Story the game will be great, too, and then you buy that one, not whatever else is on the shelf. Now, there are plenty of articles and videos out there that talk about games based on movies and TV shows, so for this talk, I'm going to take a slightly different tack, and we're going to talk about games based on specific products. After all, it's comparatively easy to retell an existing story as a video game. How on earth would you make a video game about cereal? Let's find out. Now, the cereal in question is Weetabix, the blandest substance known to man. And the game in question was released in 1984 for various microcomputers, and as you can see there, it's called Weetabix vs. the Titchies, which looks and sounds a lot more exciting than it actually is, because the game itself looks like this. This is the Amstrad Spectrum C64 and Dragon 32 versions of the game. The game itself is Space Invaders. Like, it's got a new coat of paint, but look at it, it's just Space Invaders. And I'm not entirely sure why, either. Because, like, the character you play as is called Dunk, and he was one of the mascots they had at the time. There's, like, 5 or 6 little Weetabix people, and he was one of them. But they didn't have any enemies or anything, they just, like, went on little adventures. So why is the video game a Space Invaders clone? I don't know. But I suspect because it's really easy to code that and to convert it for various home computers. Now, weirdly, this is actually pretty forward-thinking for a mid-80s tie-in game. Because typically your options were a platformer, where you collect a bunch of tokens, or 4 minigames strung together. And breaking from that tradition is pretty cool, even though what we got was a really bad Space Invaders clone. On that, honorable mention goes to Pepsi Invaders, released by Coca-Cola in 1983, in which you defend the world from Pepsi, and whatever that last icon is, presumably a cease and desist order. So the second game we're going to look at is also based on an English food. And this time, it's Quavers, a fried potato snack that, like, they're not really crisps, but English people just call them crisps. And the game is called Pushover, and it was released in 1992 for Amiga, Atari ST, DOS, and Super Nintendo. Although the Super Nintendo version didn't have any branding, which we will get to. The plot is that Colin Curley, the mascot for Quavers, drops his Quavers down an anthill. Meanwhile, an ant travels around a variety of themed worlds and solves a bunch of lateral thinking puzzles based around toppling dominoes. You may have missed the link between those 2 points, and that's because there isn't one. The game was originally developed as the puzzle game featuring G.I. Ant, and the publishers, Ocean, demanded that the sponsored content be added later, taking the focus away from the original character and moving it back towards Quavers Crisps. Now, interestingly, this is what led to the developers going bust. Red Rat sued Ocean to get the rights to their own game back, but they didn't have enough money, so they eventually just folded. Somebody in chat has commented that they didn't know this was a Quavers advert game. Possibly because if you played the Super Nintendo version, it doesn't have any sponsored content. It's the original vision for the game with no corporate meddling, and it's exactly the same game, except that the point bonuses come from like a stack of money, not a packet of crisps. There is no reason for this to be a Quavers game, because it isn't, but, you know, money. Although, fun fact, in writing this presentation, I found out that the DOS version of Pushover is currently available on Steam, Quavers branding and all. And I don't know how, because I'm fairly sure it's corporate abandonware, but somebody got the code and released it, so you can actually give this one a go pretty quickly and easily. And I kind of recommend it, because it's slow and methodical, but you feel really clever when you work out some of the puzzles. For our third title, we're going to stay in the realm of English snack food. Sadly, it's not the Chip Butty RTS that people are asking for. It's Smarties. Specifically the English kind, not the American kind. And the game in question is called Smarties Meltdown, released for the PS2 in 2006. Although if I told you that this was made for Flash in 1996, you'd probably believe me, because it's so low quality you cannot tell the difference. Side note, this is the third game I know of called Meltdown, and it's the worst one. The best one is this one, from 1986, by Alligator. So this game follows the standard template for mascot games in the mid-2000s. You run around disconnected platforms, and you have to pick up tokens, Smarties in this case, and this grants you access to other disconnected platforms and more tokens. It's kind of like Spyro the Dragon, but with less money and no soul. Aside from mechanically just not being a very good game, the main problem with Smarties Meltdown is that it's got nothing to work with. Like, Smarties are a product. They don't have a mascot. As far as I can tell, they've never had one. So with Weetabix and Quavers, you at least had a character that you could work with. But with this, you're just slapping something together on a budget. Give me money. And I feel kind of bad about this one because... Okay, so there's a couple of reasons. First, the main character is voiced by Dave Benson Phillips, who is a kids' TV host and entertainer, and he's got this big, bright voice, and it doesn't at all fit with the game that he's part of, and it feels like such a waste. And also, because I own this game. Surprise, now it's show and tell. This was a gift from my grandma, because she knew that I liked games, she knew that I liked Smarties, and this one was only £2. Can you believe it? Yes. I can absolutely believe that this game was only £2. My goodness me. I have played this game exactly twice, and that was once to see how I liked it, and I didn't, because it's bad, and another time shortly after to see if, like, did I overreact the first time? Maybe it's actually got some charm to it? It doesn't. It's not even a good bad game. I feel like the best part of Smarties Meltdown is in the title. For the next product, we're going to talk about a game called Darkened Sky, which was released for Windows and GameCube in 2002. The game plays a lot like Tomb Raider. There's large open areas broken up with short gymnastic sections, and there's occasional ranged or melee combat. And you can combine red, orange, yellow, and green mana types to create spells with different effects. Based on this description, if you don't already know, do you know what this game is promoting? Because the answer is fruity, delicious, delicious, fruity, 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 by golly they're fruity, it's Skittles. Like, check it out, in the top screen we have an orange Skittle equipped, and the bottom screen is spellcrafting with the various colours of Skittles. Now, the initial plan that the designers had was that they were going to make a game based on M&Ms. Like, specifically the characters who show up in the commercial, like red and yellow in those. They did get the license for that, but they also managed to get the license for Skittles, in case the M&M's game didn't work out. And as it happens, the company developed both. Initially, they made M&M's The Lost Formulas, and then they did this game, Darkened Sky. And by the time the game was done, the devs considered dropping the license, because it isn't really a Skittles game, it's a game with Skittles in it. A very slight but important distinction. And they figured they'd leave the Skittles in, because it was already incorporated into the gameplay and dialogue, and it was just easier to leave it in than to take it out. By all accounts, this is actually a pretty solid game, given what it is. Like, it's not going to set the world on fire, and it's very brown, but I'm told that it's fun once you get beyond the silly premise of using Skittles to save the world. And speaking of silly premises, let's talk about Duracell. Specifically, Run the Bunny, released for DOS and Windows in 1996. And I owned this one, because this was given away for free with packs of batteries. Like, they came with a 3.5-inch floppy disk sellotape to the packet. It was great. It wasn't great. The game is a pseudo 3D exploration and puzzle game, which, as a description, makes it sound way better than it actually is. It's kind of a running theme in today's presentation. You have to explore a variety of mazes to find 2 drumsticks, a drum, and a battery, which must then be delivered to the Duracell bunny hiding somewhere in the stage. And doing all of this will allow you to escape and play a little mini-game or a video or something like that. It's got some clever elements to it. So rather than finding keycards to open locked doors, you power up hairdryers to melt blocks of ice, or sprinkler systems to extinguish walls of fire and that sort of stuff. But for the most part, the game is slow, clunky, confusing, and just generally not very good. It's also incredibly dishonest as a product. If you play through to the end, you are presented with a screen that asks for your email address, so you can enter like sweepstakes to win various electronic bits and pieces. But in submitting your email address, it would also take your gameplay history. So the game was constructed to figure out your lifestyle preferences for directed email marketing. And you also had the option to email this game to a friend, with the promise that players who won would win the same prizes as the person who referred them in the first place. So this entire game is a cynical attempt to create a mass marketing advertising network for Duracell batteries. To make things a little lighter, this is not the only time Duracell have interacted with video games, because you can find Duracell batteries as treasure items in Pikmin 2. Aw, look at the cute little game, and ignore the horrible one that we just looked at. So someone in chat has just lit up, like, I remember this game! I'm so glad someone else remembers Run the Bunny. The next game on our list is called Yaris, and you don't get any points for working out what this game is trying to sell you. Yaris was available on Xbox Live Arcade for free between 2007 and 2008. It has since been taken down, and if you don't have it, you can't play it. It is a game, as you can probably imagine, made to promote the Toyota Yaris. gameplay is halfway between the special stages from Sonic 2 and Twisted Metal, which sounds like a good combination. And it is a good combination. I would genuinely play that game if it was made well. Altogether now, this game is not made well. As you can see from the screenshots, it looks really cheap and it's really bland. Especially compared to the games that it's trying to copy. So, like Sonic 2 in particular is radical and larger than life and brightly hypercolored, and it assaults your senses. Yaris is the greyest thing I have ever seen. And Yaris also has a particular problem in that it is a car combat game where you cannot damage the cars, which is arguably the game's one job. It's really more of a problem of car sponsorships than game design though, and Yaris is not the only thing to suffer from it. Notably, the first few seasons of The Walking Dead, the TV show, were sponsored by Hyundai, and that contract is still kind of in effect, which is why the team drives a Hyundai, and it's still pristine and unscratched and running just fine, despite having been sat there unattended for years in the zombie apocalypse. And you'll also notice it never breaks down. Like, the cast is always forced to abandon the car for some reason other than mechanical fault, because you can't show the car taking damage, breaking down, or even running out of fuel. It's wild. For our final game, we're going to go back to food, and we're going to go back to cereal, and we're going to look at the cereal you probably thought I was going to talk about at the start of all this. It's Chex Quest! Chex Quest was released in 1996 for DOS and Windows, and it holds the honor of being the first video game to be given away in boxes of cereal. It is a non-violent, sugar-free, first-person shooter. You play as a piece of Chex, running around 5 levels, taking down aliens who have infiltrated the world and want to cover everything in slime. And if the game looks familiar, it's because this game is a reskin of Ultimate Doom. It even includes certain levels and text from Ultimate Doom, even the ending, like with the dead rabbit. But you have to cheat to get to that stuff, though. They came up with some pretty clever ways of getting around the age-inappropriate content. So while Doom Guy's character portrait gets progressively bloodier until he dies, your guy in Chex Quest gets covered in more and more slime until he's stuck to the floor, unable to move. Rather than exploding enemies into piles of gore, Chex Quest evaporates them and sends them to the Shadow Realm. Someone has commented it looks a bit more like Wolfenstein than Doom, and I get that, possibly because it's blue, but it is an Ultimate Doom mod. And the reason being, it's because it was cheap to get the license for Ultimate Doom, because Quake had recently come out, rendering Doom obsolete, and making it cheap to license, as I say. And it's what the devs knew. Like, they'd been working with Doom Builder in the past, so they knew they could make and edit levels comparatively easy, or easier, compared to learning something new. And this is probably the one that most people in the chat and on the VOD know about. It's got a pretty devoted fan base, and a lot of people still enjoy this one, even now. In fact, this game is also available on Steam. But rather than being the original version, it is a HD remake. So that's nice. And that concludes my talk on 7 baffling product-based video games. Thank you for coming. I hope you enjoyed it. I will not be taking questions. Okay, bye.